What happened when I asked AI, am I going to be okay in retirement? That's what we're going to find out today. Hi, this is Jill from the North Woods talking about how AI can make our lives a little bit better, one small step at a time. We're going to talk about two sides of the retirement question. So, part one was a conversation I started with AI. I gave it basically the sums of money I had in various accounts, the time frame for my retirement, and basically four possible scenarios that all are very likely. So let's just think about them. I asked it that essentially, if I work for 10 years, I will get a pension, I will have my 401k, and I will also have my Social Security money. Okay, but I have to work 10 years. What if we get laid off? What if something happens and I can't work for 10 more years? Okay, so that was scenario one. Scenario two is, what if I only end up working for 5 years? I would get some of a pension, but not much of it. What if I don't even make it for 5 years? Or then comes the question of the numbers. What if I took retirement at this age versus that age? Because if you go to a financial planner, you should absolutely go to your financial planner and get your numbers and figure them out. And most of the retirement tools, if you go to any of the companies, they have retirement tools that will tell you, basically, there's a scale that will tell you how likely that you'll be successful. What are the chances that I'm going to be able to retire and not need for money unless, something extraordinary happens, right? And that's really where it is that I started out with this question by giving these scenarios to AI and then asking the question, am I going to be okay? I think that we all kind of look at our retirement by asking that kind of question. And there's a lot that goes into it. Like I said, some of it is just outright math. My retirement guy who works at the company that I have my retirement with talked it over with me. I've used the tools, but I wanted to be able to just run different thoughts and different scenarios in there. And so this episode is what happens when you ask these sort of math questions to AI. What is it as kind of a thinking partner to help us know, are we going to be okay in retirement? And so, like I said, it kind of goes into that particular place where I can ask that question, am I going to be okay? The biggest question in my mind is that if I make the 10 years, I feel like I will be okay. If I make 5 years, I probably be okay. But what happens financially if I don't even make 5 years? Big layoff happens and I'm gone. And what would happen in that particular case? And so let's, use this computer as a giant calculator, but with a little bit of heart to it, asking the questions about how much money would I have a month? How does my financial system change when a person does retire? Instead of having this sort of swirling fog where you understand, like I said, you get tools, you talk to a person, you get tools, you understand how it goes. What is it that we can actually prepare to about when it comes to retirement? And so in this particular case, I was using ChatGPT, but Claude or any of the AIs are very good at this kind of calculation. And so you can look at these kinds of scenarios. And essentially, when you think about retirement, you too probably have questions in the back of your mind. What is it that you are worried about the most? What is it you're thinking about the most? Or what is it you want the most? I know my poor retirement guy, he was talking to me and he goes, well, what do you want, Jill? Do you want to travel the world? Do you want to buy a different house? Do you want to, buy a log cabin and I really wanted none of those things. I just didn't want to eat dog food, although dog food's expensive. When I retire, I just want to know, am I okay? But you have to come, I think, to AI with your own sort of ideas. When you pull back the headlines of this whole conversation, there's a lot of fears that I've had about retirement for years and years. Some assumptions that I didn't really understand how retirement works. And it gets foggy for me. Even though I had numbers, real numbers, that's what happens is you kind of get the fog and AI can help you clear up that particular fog. So when you're working with AI, I've been doing the responsible thing, like I said, going to the calculators and talking to my person, giving consistent contributions. I didn't chase trends. I worked slowly over time and just did the steady thing. Put money in a 401k, a Roth IRA, save some emergency money. And now, like I said, I work in a situation where I would potentially have a pension, but you want to slowly build over time. And then I thought, what if this isn't good enough? Because my fears come from the fact that I started very late. Even though I threw a ton of money at it in my later years when I had a better job, I realized there were some things I just didn't really understand. And so, like I said, these types of anxieties come out of the fact that we have good intentions, but we just don't understand everything or how it actually works. So when I asked that question, am I going to be okay? And I put those particular paths in front of AI, it did a number of things for me. First of all, it was able then, to run through these numbers. And just as a quick disclaimer, just so you know, I'm not a financial advisor. AI is not your financial advisor. When you're making decisions about your money, you want a licensed professional who knows the situation. Just like if you're going to go, do medical stuff, you want a doctor. But what AI is excellent at is helping you think a little bit more clearly about the situation so that when you actually go to your financial advisor, you're not so foggy. You have better questions to ask, and it actually starts shaping what your own situation is. So when we get to there, I want to bring up this prompt. I didn't just say, help me with retirement. I gave it the real picture. I actually gave it, and I said that I want to walk through, this is my prompt, I want to walk through several different versions of my future. And I don't want to assume that everything goes perfectly. Can you help me understand and model these stages? Let's look at what happens if I only make it a short amount of time in my current role and then I have to leave earlier than planned. The middle scenario, what if I stay longer, build a little bit more stability? That's the 5-year thing, but I'm still not all the way to the full plan. And then let's look at the full version. What if I make it the entire 10 years? I get the maximum benefit that I can get from my pension. And then I also wanted to layer it with, what if I held off on my Social Security until the last minute? What if I took my Social Security a little bit earlier so I didn't have to save money to have those gap years? What are the implications of that? And like I said, you can get those calculations off of your financial retirement system, but there's more to it. It's more complex than that. How much of life would be guaranteed? And this is what ChatGPT did for me. How much of my income is guaranteed month over month, right? How much of it is relying on investments that could shift, right? If we tank on the stock market, I could lose a majority of it. Or if the stock market did really well, I could have a lot of it. But those are flexible accounts, not like Social Security and pensions that are going to be a little bit more solid. So ChatGPT broke it up into, you can count on this, and this is a little bit more flexible, and then understanding sort of the trade-offs behind it. How can you help me understand and compare those paths in a way that will make sense to me? And I told it, honestly, I don't do well with finances. For as good as I am with math, I was basically a statistics major in college. For whatever reason, as soon as the emotion of money gets involved, I start to panic. And first of all, I want you to notice a couple of things about, the prompt itself. Yeah, I didn't ask for exact numbers because it can give me estimates, right? We cannot get exact numbers, what the retirement's in, how much it's going to go up or go down, because investments are rocky, right? So we can only talk about generalities. And secondly, I don't want that AI to assume that everything is going to be perfect. Because honestly, things go, there's down markets, there's up markets, there's things that happen along the way. So I'm not looking for the best case scenario. I'm not looking for the worst case scenario. I'm looking for something that is a moderate scenario. And then the third thing that I was trying to understand is this trade-off between what happens if something really bad happens at my work and I get laid off versus I can actually make the full time and everything's going to be better. So let's take a look at that. So I walked through those particular scenarios. And so the one thing that I had to look at was essentially the early exit. What if I don't make it? What if there's layoffs in my organization and I have to go early? Or I got sick. Let's say it wasn't even layoffs. What happens if I were to get sick and I can't continue working as long as I think I can? I'm actually going to work pretty late in my life. And so that's realistic to think that maybe I can't do that. So what AI helped me see in that structure was how much of my life would be covered by guaranteed income. So I even gave it a budget of how much I spend and how much I think I will spend, right? So how much of my budget is going to be covered by guaranteed money? And then how much is going to be covered by an unknown sum of money, which is in investments? And then what does that gap look like if I ended up having to leave early? And it is a gap. It is a gap for sure, but it gave me some realistic, numbers that maybe I would have to work part-time. I would have to find something to do. So it was less scary than I thought it was, but it's still dangerous for me to do. And if I stay longer, can you help me now understand what it would be like if I got the full benefit? And it gave me the full picture of it. This is how much would be guaranteed. This is how much would be flex money. And this is what your budget would look like. And so then the middle scenario was the one that kind of surprised me, which is staying a little bit longer. So I would make the 5 years, but I wouldn't make the 10 years. Because again, we live in a volatile work era right now. Am I going to be able to make the full 10 years? And what AI showed me is that that path to doing that middle path is less income, right? It's not as guaranteed as it was before. I am more not victim. That's not the word. I am more impacted by the fluctuations of the market. If I made the full 10 years, I would probably be okay regardless of what the market does in the next 10 years. If I don't, I will be more at the whim of the market. I will have to have some room to absorb unexpected things. And that's where, I realized it's going to be a little dangerous for me. But the trade-off became very visible of what would happen if I ended up losing my job early. And then these scenarios in that full timeline is, like I said, if everything goes exactly right, I am not as shaken by what happens in the market. So seeing those three side by side and the way that AI framed it as compared to secured money versus flexible money, contributions, what I should be doing now, and the timing of my retirement helped me make a big decision. Now, the next part always comes in, and that's Social Security piece of it, taking it for granted that Social Security still exists when I retire. I hope it does. But essentially, there's a lot of fight out there in this world about whether you take Social Security at the very last instant you can. I think it's 70 years right now. Do you wait till you're 70? Or do you retire earlier and take Social Security earlier? What's the benefit? And you will see people who are married to both sides. No, you wait. And most financially responsible people say, no, you wait to the very last minute. You wait till you're 70 years old and you take Social Security because your benefit will be significantly higher. But what if I were sick? Like I said, what happens if I get sick between now and 10 years from now and I can't work the full 10 years? What would happen to me if I took it earlier? And it actually ran the numbers and played those scenarios to me. Because Social Security timing isn't just about math, it's also about longevity. It's about my health at any given time. It's about cash flow, your risk tolerance. All those things are right there at it at all, right there with it. And so essentially what happens is if you take it earlier, you make more months of money in those earlier months. Let's say you took it at 67, you're getting 3 extra years of Social Security money, right? But if you wait till 70, you get significantly more money month after month. And so then you live off of your other money early on, and then you have more Social Security later on. But like I said, what happens about your health? What happens if you're not a healthy person? At what year would I break in even? I think it came in at like 80. At 80, I would break even. So if you don't think you're going to live till 80, you don't want, like I said, not a financial advisor, but in my particular case that's where I broke in even. So then the question comes in, wouldn't you want to have more money when you're at your most a frail part of your life where, like right now, let's say, I'm just making things up. Let's say at 70, I needed extra income. Probably still be healthy enough to take a part-time job and work a little bit, right? At 80, probably not. And so you're at your most vulnerable point. And so you have to take those things into consideration. Those scenarios in there helped me understand exactly what it would look like in that particular case. And so right now too, I'm also feeling like I'm comparing my future budget to my current budget. And I don't think that that's now the right way to think about it. I said, can you help me reframe this? What will it actually cost me to live compared to how I'm living right now? And the one prompt that shocked me the most is the part about taxes. That when I'm retired, there is no more payroll tax, right? We're paying a lot of money in payroll taxes as working people every year. I'm not retiring or committing to my retirement fund anymore. I'm not sending money to that anymore. And there are work-related expenses as well. They're just not going to exist in retirement. So my budget drastically drops when I go into retirement by a lot. When you strip all of that away, you're looking at different expenses. The expenses that stay are going to be this house, the food I eat, the health insurance I need, any medical bills that I have that won't get covered by insurance. But the scenario looks entirely different. So it helped me go through that so that I wouldn't be guessing. Let's look at my real life expenses now versus what it will look like when I retire. Oh, gosh. And so that helped me understand the entire piece of it, that the gap is a lot different than what I thought it looked like. And so then I asked AI the question about what do these scenarios look like when it comes to the market? What happens if the market tanks from now into the next 10 years? What happens if it's a pretty stable market and it sort of acts like it has been acting for, some years up, some years down? And having a way to take that market anxiety, some fear that is just out of your control. There's not a darn thing you can do about the market going up and down, right? And the people who try to play the market, what they do, I know people, when they saw in 2008 the economy tank, they pulled all their money out of stocks thinking it's too volatile, I'm too scared. If they didn't leave those in until I forgot what year it was, they never made their money back. And so they actually ended up in pretty bad shape, depending on at what point you're retiring. But help me understand market volatility a little bit more, because it has a lot to do with your risk tolerance. How much is in stocks? How much is in bonds? How much is in foreign markets and domestic markets and all those things? So it helped me understand that clearly about how it is, the trade-offs back and forth. To be honest, this picture of this AI conversation it's excellent at holding all these complexities together, and it won't get overwhelmed. But then it helped explain to me in a way, because like I said, for whatever reason, money freaks me out. I can do math on everything, but when you bring it in with money, I get freaked out. It helped explain concepts to me like Social Security, break-even points, market volatility, clarifying questions so I could understand my own scenario better. And that it was great at, and it helped me understand it a lot better. What AI can't do is it can't actually, first of all, know your numbers unless you tell it. And you have to be careful about that, right? We don't know how exactly AI is going to use, how our privacy, places get hacked, data gets hacked, right? So, what I did in my particular case is I used big round numbers. I didn't tell it where I had my accounts. I didn't tell it exactly what I had. I just said, let's use these giant round numbers. It has to know your tax situation, your pension formula, your real balances. But essentially, what I gave it instead was a framework, right? I have a financial guy who works for for the retirement company where my retirement's being held. He can go through the exact numbers. I just want a framework of how this works. I want you to explain it to me a way that I understand it. And it's not going to tell you where to put your money, what kind of accounts you should be involved in. That is for a licensed financial advisor, but it can help you understand it better. I even mentioned some things that my financial advisor said to me, and I wanted to check, is this right? Is that right? And AI can help you walk through this information so that the fog clears away. You can see clearly exactly what it is. So this preparation was entirely valuable to me, and it was something that I could do slowly over time. And, even I went to bed that night and I woke up the next day and I had a couple more questions. So it allowed me, then the next day to go and ask those other questions. I met with my financial advisor. I had a specific meeting. I could have sent him an email or called him on the phone, but this was very easy for me to say, oh, wait, I have one more question that I want to ask you. And you're going to look at exactly how it is that I want to understand my retirement better. I don't want general advice. I want my specific situation. I want to go through my specific kinds of retirement accounts I have. How do they work? How do the taxes work? How does Social Security work? How does my budget look? And I feel that now being able to compare my various futures and look at it, I have a framework now that I understand exactly what this looks like. I think these scenarios have been very valuable to me. So what I want you to take away from this particular episode is not numbers and not exact prompts. What I'm telling you to do is think of a way of asking where you stop asking whether you're okay and you start actually asking what the paths are. What kind of map do I have before me? How susceptible to the market influences am I? How susceptible to Social Security changes am I in? What will my budget look like that's different? And when you can compare them side by side, their trade-offs, their real structures, you're not just doing retirement planning, and you're doing retirement understanding. And you move from a place of worrying about it to understanding. And then you start being able to trust. And like I said, next time I go talk to my financial advisor, I feel like I understand it better. I understand some of the things he was saying better. I understand some of my decisions that I've made in the past a little bit better and what I have going in the future. Not everything is going to be certain because there's going to be some things that we just can't control. But this is going to be less guessing. I understand now the framework of what my retirement looks like. I'm looking at a clearer set of possibilities. And you know what? Nothing's going to be perfect. My financial advisor is not going to be perfect. He's the expert. He's licensed in there. But these questions I gave it were honest, were filled with worry. And instead, what I got back led me to a lot of clarity and an understanding about that. Next time, we're going to talk about the next surprising thing that came out of this retirement conversation, the part 2 of it, which had to do with the heart instead of the brain. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that this is good for you. What challenges do you have that you think AI might be able to help you? I would love to hear from it. I'm Jill from the North Woods. You can put comments right here, or you can email me at jill@startwithsmallsteps.com. I'd love to hear from you. Again, AI will never replace a licensed professional, but it can help you understand exactly what's going on in the big picture of things and give you a good set of questions so when you do talk to a financial planner, you know exactly what it is you really want to hear about. Thanks so much. Have a great day.